The second module will address political approaches to energy security. What does it actually mean? I would say that approaches to energy security can be classified in 4 groups, and they can be schematized in 4 different quadrants. As you can see on the following slide, there are 4 quadrants. 2 of them, the upper quadrants, A and B, are a little bit in a darker color. Both of them represent the approaches which look at the rationality of actors in terms of decision making, strategy formulation, and also the impact what the actors would like to see from an energy policy. 2 other approaches, which are a little bit lighter in color, C and D, represent the views which would claim that actors are not always rational. They either exaggerate a threat, or on the contrary, they do not see a threat. So the level of information of these actors, of the policymakers or of industry representatives, is rather short or restricted. Then we have another division. You have 2 quadrants where letters are in black, and 2 other quadrants where the letters are in purple. So the A and C quadrants in black letters reflect the approaches which would look first of all at the political dimension of energy security. And the purple ones consider economic dimension of the energy security. At the end of the day, we have 4 different quadrants. First quadrant, A, is a policy-focused approach on rational actors. It means that the actors view a political dimension of energy security, and they practically know what they want from energy security. Quadrant B is very similar to quadrant A in understanding the rationality of actors, but they take a different dimension on energy security, highlighting economic importance of energy security. And it would mostly focus on international and economic governance. Both approaches would be somehow criticized by the C and D, who consider that actors are not always rational. In the case of the quadrant C, we see that energy security is a policy issue, but is based on a number of perceptions of a threat, which can be either misperceived or, on the contrary, real. This approach is very similar to the approach A in a way that it's a policy approach. But contrary to the quadrant A, it would consider the actors as non-rational. And finally, the approach D looks at the non-rational dimension, but economic view on energy security, mostly related to market failures. So very similar to the approach C in a way of understanding the non-rationality of actors, but opposing on the dimension of energy security because it would look at the economics first of all. What do these approaches mean exactly? First of all, the approach of political view and rational perspective of energy security would consider a necessity of self-sufficiency in the highly interdependent world, because political independence is one of the main elements in international relations. So energy security would, first of all, be related to the self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency, which can rarely be attained at 100%, consists of the following: diversification of supplies, diversification of fuel mix, subsequent energy intensity decrease, reduction of dependencies, and finally of all, avoiding political pressures. Economic view, rational economic view, would oppose the previous view on the fact that for economic perspective, there is no problem in interdependency, but there is an issue of predictability of norms and practices. As an example, Russia-Ukraine crisis of 2009 happened because of the collapse of governance between the two countries on transit and supply issues. And in order to have a predictability of norms and practices, one should create dispute settlement mechanisms. And dispute settlement mechanisms stimulate a favorable investment climate and also a cooperation between the companies, including cross-ownerships and exchange of assets. That becomes then a major ground for energy security. Energy governance would be the main prerequisite. A third view considers the process of politicization which occurs in energy policies. And this process of politicization is called securitization. And securitization starts at a particular point of time and addresses a very particular issue. For example, coal industry was much more securitized in 1920s than now. Also in 1970s and 1980s, the importance of oil security was much higher than now. However, since 2000s, we observe a securitization, read an extreme politicization of natural gas. It is important to understand that political relations sometimes create a ground for further energy cooperation. And on the contrary, collapse of political relations create difficulties for energy infrastructures. Arab gas pipeline going from Egypt to Syria is one of the examples of infrastructural failure due to political contradictions. So securitization is the ground for exaggeration of threats or of politicization of threat, which then generate a very specific debate on what is energy security. And finally, the fourth approach would consider market risks, which are not always clearly seen by the actors. Market risks related to underinvestments, to discount rates in investment projects, and also to insufficient price for long-term investments. So market failures would be the main concern of the fourth approach. Political risks and political dimension of energy security has to take into account a number of issues, like domestic instabilities, interstate conflicts, perception of external threats, again, a politicization. And what is very important to understand is a dimension of willingness to pay for security, which is often opposed to welfare laws, because willingness to pay somehow signifies that somebody has to pay for security. So you can see on this curve that cost of providing security can go up with cost of risk reduction. However, the willingness to pay is dependent on the degree of security. And you can see that the two curves are opposing each other. And higher the cost of providing security is, the lower willingness to pay for energy security will be. So the question of energy security is very much related to the willingness to pay for this security. So what policy to have for ensuring energy security? Let's see a view by a policy think tank.